Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. This is going to be my Guardians of the Galaxy 2 video. We might know who the villain is. Elizabeth Debicki might be playing Ayesha. So I'm going to explain who that is, and it's going to change who some of the other characters are. Like, we're not sure who Peter Quill's father is going to be. That also has a lot to do with who this villain is. Fathers and children are supposed to be a big theme of the movie. Gamora is the daughter of Thanos. They're going to continue that line. Even though he's not going to be a big presence in the film, they're going to deal with the idea of it, finding out who Peter Quill's father is. So let's start with the villain first. So Elizabeth Debicki is rumored to be playing the main villain of the film. The rumor is she's playing Ayesha, who's like this genetically engineered soulmate for Adam Warlock that possesses this really cosmic soul that's super powerful. One of the reasons people think it's legitimate is because Adam Warlock could be a part of the movie without actually being a part of the movie. Here's where it gets a little complicated, because Guardians is really tied up with the idea of Thanos, his quest to form the Infinity Gauntlet, the Infinity Gems. Adam Warlock possessed the Soul Gem in the comics. That's where Thanos got it from. But because the movie seems like it's not going to be doing him, and it seems like the Soul Gem is going to appear in one of the other movies, we just had to find another candidate for Peter Quill's father. And then when they cast Kurt Russell, everyone's like, oh, that's got to be him. Almost any version of any character that Kurt Russell has played on screen could be a version of Peter Quill's father. So here's where things start to line up a little bit. In the comics, Ayesha has a son with Quasar named Starhawk. Marvel's version of that character is a big part of the Guardians of the Galaxy comics, but he's also a big part of the new Guardians comic that debuted in 2014 called Guardians 3000. The working title of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is Guardians 3000, so a lot of people are taking that to be clues that Peter Quill's father is going to be Starhawk, so Peter Quill's grandmother will be Ayesha, and that will explain how he has this cosmic DNA, enabling him to handle an Infinity Stone without being vaporized. So remembering that the movies change little bits about comic book storylines, I'm not expecting them to do anything really big, but if they're going to use an Infinity Gem, that Guardians 3000 story that Starhawk just came back in actually involves a very Groundhog Day type situation. Even his backstory reads like he's connected to the Time Gem. His life is kind of like a Groundhog's Day situation where he's destined to be reincarnated as a baby and relive events over and over. I don't know if the movie's going to end up doing it this way, but in the comics, Starhawk goes back, gets like reincarnated as a baby, but he still retains all the knowledge of the future. He uses that to his advantage to try and change the events of the future, and that just sounds like a slam dunk Time Gem story. But beyond that, really like the only big things that we know about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 are that Peter Quill is going to find out who his father is, we might see an Infinity Gem, and we're going to meet a couple new crew members. I mean, we have Dancing Baby Groot, so they'll address the regrown version of Groot. Mantis is joining the crew. If you don't know who the Mantis character is, she's another non-human member of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics. So the interesting thing about this, assuming that the villain is going to be Ayesha, that's who this really is going to be. She's going to be Peter Quill's grandmother. The twist is, in the comics, she's not typically thought of as a villain. So the real question is what her motivation is, what it is that she wants that puts her in opposition to the heroes. But I am expecting a few changes from comic book versions of characters because we're talking about beings with vast cosmic powers. And we saw the Collector in the first movie. He's one of the elders of the universe, incredibly powerful in the comics. But when we saw him on screen, he seemed relatively normal. So we might see depowered versions of some of these crazy comic book characters. But you can kind of see thematically where Peter Quill is going to encounter his biological family, and he's going to have to choose between them and his adopted family, the Guardians. So I'm expecting a very lovable, charming, asshole version of Kurt Russell in this movie. Yondu talked about him in the first movie like he was an asshole, just as much of an asshole as Peter Quill is. So you can see how funny it's going to be when scoundrel Peter Quill meets his father, who's an even bigger scoundrel. But I know a lot of you are confused by it all because Peter Quill's father in the comics is Jason Spartax. James Gunn already said that he's not going to be doing it that way just because he doesn't want to do the Spartoy Empire. There's a couple big space empires that Marvel can't do just because Fox owns the rights. But let me know in the comments, based on Ayesha being the villain, do you think that that means Peter Quill's father is going to be Starhawk? Because previously a lot of people were like, maybe he'll be Eros of Titan, who's the brother of Thanos, so they'll connect it to the villain in that way. But when we found out that Thanos wasn't going to be in the movie, and then we found out this might be the villain, it kind of shifted that. So given all those things, it does sound plausible that Starhawk is his dad. And it totally sounds like a character that Kurt Russell could pull off. and it sounds really awesome on screen. The funny thing about Marvel movies is they're made to be very broad, very simple concepts, like regardless of what the plot is or whatever complex ideas are presented, you could take a little kid to the movie and he'd be able to absorb the emotional story, like a son meeting his dad for the first time, learning that maybe he's not the nicest guy in the world, maybe he's better off with his adopted family, the Guardians of the Galaxy. But Guardians is like the big spring Marvel movie next year, so we'll probably see the first trailer later this summer when we get closer to Doctor Strange. Marvel skipped San Diego Comic-Con last year, and to this date, they have not announced a Hall H panel yet, so I'm not expecting any big Marvel movie footage at Comic-Con this summer, so they might just wait for Doctor Strange to drop all this new stuff. But here's my other big question. Even though we're not going to have Thanos in the movie, do you think we're going to see an Infinity Gem? Because there are a couple more movies before we get Infinity War Part 1, and I'm wondering if they're going to hold one of the gems to the first part of that, or if we'll see the Time Gem and the Soul Gem before then, because there's two more gems that we haven't seen yet. So currently there are just a couple objects that Marvel could use that would be stand-ins for the gems, like they use the Tesseract as the Space Gem. So if they're going to do a gem in Guardians 2, they could use the Star Brand, they could use the Time Gem to explain how it is Starhawk has this Groundhog's Day type life where he gets reincarnated over and over. They could introduce the Soul Gem in Doctor Strange. They could also introduce it during Thor Ragnarok, just because the villain of that movie is going to be so powerful. It seems like they're saving the rest of the gems for really overpowered characters in movies. So that's why we didn't see it in Civil War, because they wanted it to feel very human. So it was like A-list Avenger versus A-list Avenger instead of a god versus a god, like you see in Thor Ragnarok. So let me know where you think we're going to see those other two gems, because I definitely think we're going to see a gem during Thor Ragnarok. But what's going to happen next is, I just saw Ninja Turtles, so I'm going to do an Easter egg video. Be sure to subscribe to get that. I'll post it tomorrow. I'll put a spoiler warning on it. But if you've seen the 80s cartoon, then you totally know what's happening. You totally know about Krang, Technodrome, all that stuff. It was a lot of fun, so be sure to check it out. While you guys wait for me to post that video, you can click here to learn all about Marvel's Civil War 2, and you can click here to learn all about the Flash Season 3 doing Flashpoint. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.